Unreasonable Hospitality, The Remarkable Power of Giving People More Than They Expect, by Will Guidara. Introduction. Imagine this. You're in a grand, regal hall in London, a place so imposing it might as well be a palace. You're wearing a tuxedo, sitting next to your business partner, and you are surrounded by your heroes, the most celebrated chefs and restaurateurs in the world. Every culinary giant you've ever heard of is here, drinking champagne. And not a single one of them is talking to you. You're there because your restaurant, 11 Madison Park, has just been nominated as one of the world's 50 best restaurants. It's a huge honor. But you feel like a freshman on the first day of high school, trying to figure out where to sit in the cafeteria. You and your partner Daniel try to guess where you'll land on the list. You guess number 40. He, ever the optimist, guesses 35. The lights go down. The music swells. An MC walks onto the stage, and with very little preamble says, to kick it off, coming in at number 50, a new entry from New York City, 11 Madison Park. 50. Number 50. Dead last. The wind is knocked out of you. You and your partner slump in your chairs, staring at your feet in devastation. What you don't realize is that when your name is called, your faces are projected onto a gigantic, 30-foot-tall screen for the entire auditorium to see. Everyone, all of your heroes, just watched you react to your great honor with utter dejection. The night is over before it even began. This single moment of crushing disappointment could have been the end of the story. Instead, it was the beginning of a revolution. It sparked a journey that would take that restaurant from the very bottom of the list to the absolute top, earning the coveted title of #1 restaurant in the world. How did they do it? The answer lies in a simple, two-word philosophy scribbled on a cocktail napkin late that night, fueled by a bottle of bourbon and a refusal to be reasonable. That philosophy is the heart of the book we're exploring today, Unreasonable Hospitality, by Will Guidara. This isn't just a book about restaurants. It's a manual for how to make people feel seen, how to turn transactions into relationships, and how to build a team that finds joy in making others feel good. Guidara's story is proof that the secret to extraordinary success, in any field, isn't just about having a great product. It's about how you make people feel. By the end of our time together, you'll understand the profound difference between service and hospitality. You'll have a playbook for creating magical, unforgettable moments for your customers, your colleagues, and even the people in your own life. And you'll see why the most powerful thing you can do in business and in life is to give people more than they expect. Book summary. The story of Unreasonable Hospitality begins not in a fancy kitchen, but on the steps outside a London hotel, with two dejected restaurateurs, Will Guidara and his chef partner Daniel Hum. They had just been ranked 50th out of the 50 best restaurants in the world. After leaving the awards party early, they sat with a bottle of bourbon and went through what Will describes as the 5 stages of grief. First, denial. Did that really just happen? Then, anger. Who did they think they were? After that came bargaining, then a long stretch of depression, and finally, as the bottle emptied, they landed on a hard-won acceptance. They had to admit a difficult truth to themselves. The restaurants at the top of that list, places like El Bulli in Spain or Noma in Denmark, hadn't just made great food. They had changed the conversation. They introduced new ideas and techniques that influenced everyone. Will and Daniel looked at their own restaurant, 11 Madison Park, and asked themselves a tough question: what had they done that was truly groundbreaking? The answer was, nothing. They were excellent curators. They had taken the best features from all the great restaurants that came before them and executed them flawlessly. Their restaurant was beautiful. It made a lot of people happy. It had even earned 4 stars from the New York Times, a monumental achievement. But it hadn't changed the game. It was in that moment of raw honesty that a new ambition was born. Will thought of a paperweight his dad had given him when he was young. It read, "What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail?" Fueled by that question and the last of the bourbon, They took out a cocktail napkin and wrote, "We will be #1 in the world." But just writing it down wasn't enough. They needed a how. How would they get there? Most of the top chefs had focused on innovating the food on the plate. Will, however, began to think about something else. Something more timeless. Fads in food come and go, but one human desire never, ever fades: the desire to be taken care of. Daniel's food was already extraordinary. He was one of the best chefs on the planet. So, Will thought, what if they could match that culinary excellence with an equal, obsessive, passionate focus on hospitality? What if they dedicated themselves to making both their team and their guests feel a true sense of belonging? Just before he went to sleep that night, Will took out the napkin and added 2 more words underneath their audacious goal. Unreasonable hospitality. So what exactly is the difference between service and hospitality? This is a question Will Guidara obsessed over for years. The best answer he ever got was from a woman he was interviewing. She told him, "Service is black and white, hospitality is color." Think about that for a moment. Service, the black and white, is the technical delivery of a product. It's getting the right plate to the right person at the right table. It's competence. It's efficiency. It's doing your job correctly. Hospitality, the color, is how you make people feel about the job you're doing. It's the authentic connection, the warmth, the feeling that someone genuinely cares about your experience. Service is a monologue, "Here is your order." Hospitality is a dialogue. It's about listening, connecting, and responding to unspoken needs. Will's entire career, it turns out, was a journey toward understanding this distinction. His education didn't start in a classroom or a boardroom. It started at home. Both of his parents worked in hospitality. His dad, Frank Guidara, was a major executive in the restaurant world, and his mom was a flight attendant back in the golden age of air travel. But his most profound lesson came from a place of deep personal struggle. When Will was just 4 years old, his mother was diagnosed with brain cancer. Over the years, her condition declined. The radiation treatments took a heavy toll, leaving her unable to use the left side of her body. Eventually, she lost the ability to communicate and became a full quadriplegic. But she never stopped being a mom. She never stopped showing up. Every single day, she would have her home health aide push her wheelchair to the end of their road to wait for Will to get home from school. She couldn't speak. She couldn't hug him. But she could be there, waiting for him, with a huge smile on her face. That smile, he says, was all he needed. It taught him an invaluable lesson: what it feels like to be truly, genuinely welcomed. This feeling, the magic of being welcomed, was what drew him to the restaurant world. For his 12th birthday, his dad took him to the legendary Four Seasons restaurant in New York City. It was the fanciest place he had ever seen. A server carved his duck on a gleaming cart right next to their table. When he dropped his napkin, another one appeared instantly, and the server called him sir. He says the restaurant cast a spell on him. For those 2.5 hours, the rest of the world fell away. That night, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with his life. His journey wasn't a straight line, though. It was a winding path of learning from some of the best in the business. After graduating from Cornell's prestigious School of Hotel Administration, he went to work for one of his heroes, the restaurateur Danny Meyer. Meyer had built a company, Union Square Hospitality Group, on a revolutionary philosophy he called enlightened hospitality. The core idea was simple but radical: he prioritized his employees first. Even before the guests. Even before the investors. The logic was that if you hire great people, treat them incredibly well, and invest in their growth, they will, in turn, take incredible care of the customers. And they did. Working in Meyer's restaurants, Will learned the power of a shared language in building a culture. There were catchphrases for everything. Constant, gentle pressure was about the commitment to always be improving, little by little. Be the Swan was a reminder to appear graceful and calm to the guest, no matter how furiously you were paddling beneath the surface. His favorite, though, was make the charitable assumption. This meant assuming the best of people, even when they weren't at their best. If an employee is late, don't lecture them. First, ask if everything is okay. If a guest is being difficult, don't assume they're a jerk. Maybe they're having the worst day of their life. Maybe they need more hospitality than anyone else in the room. This philosophy was so deeply embedded that some outsiders called the company a cult. Will's take? A cult is just what people in weak cultures call companies with strong ones. But as much as he loved this environment, his father, Frank, gave him some crucial advice. He introduced Will to the concept of restaurant smart versus corporate smart. Restaurant smart companies, like Danny Meyer's, are all about creativity and hospitality. The people on the ground have the autonomy to make decisions, to connect with guests, to create magic. But they often lack the back-end systems, the accounting, the purchasing controls, that make a business highly profitable and scalable. Corporate smart companies are the opposite. They have all the systems and controls in place. They are ruthlessly efficient. But that control can stifle creativity. The more you take power away from the people on the ground, the less human and connected the experience feels for the customer. His dad's point was clear. If Will wanted to one day run his own company, he needed to master both. He needed to be both restaurant smart and corporate smart. So, Will made a difficult decision. He left the warm, creative culture of Danny Meyer's company and took a job in the basement of the MetLife building, working for his dad's old company, Restaurant Associates. He spent his mornings in the walk-in refrigerator, counting oysters and calculating food costs. He spent his afternoons in the accounting department, analyzing spreadsheets. It was boot camp and business school rolled into one. And to his surprise, he loved it. He learned from a controller named Hani, an old schoolmaster of the numbers, how powerful systems could be. He watched Hani spot a tiny anomaly in a food cost report, trace it back to the skyrocketing price of lobster, and save the company a fortune in a matter of minutes, all without leaving his desk. Will realized that corporate controls didn't have to stifle creativity. They could actually enable it by taking the financial worries off the chef's plate, freeing them up to focus on the food. But he also saw the downside. At another restaurant, he moved a flower vase on the bar to help the bartenders better connect with their guests. 2 days later, it was moved back. Corporate arts and design had stopped by and said it wasn't his job to move things. Later, he fired a toxic but popular server, only to have human resources rehire the man without even asking for his side of the story. The lesson was clear. Taken too far, corporate smart could become restaurant dumb. You need to trust the people on the ground. Armed with this dual education, Will eventually return to Danny Meyer's organization, this time to run the food operations at the newly renovated Museum of Modern Art. It was here that he began to truly forge his own philosophy, balancing the two worlds he had come from. This is where he developed what he calls the rule of 95/5. The idea is simple: manage 95% of your business down to the absolute penny. Be ruthless. Be disciplined. But then, spend the last 5% foolishly. His first test of this was a gelato cart he became obsessed with designing for the museum's sculpture garden. Because the cart would be sharing space with works by Picasso and Matisse, every detail had to be perfect. He partnered with a world-class gelato maker and negotiated an incredible deal on the product and even got the cart for free. He managed 95% of his budget with intense discipline. But then he found them. A company in Italy that made tiny, paddle-shaped, exquisitely designed blue plastic spoons. They were heartbreakingly, preposterously expensive. But he had to have them. He knew they were the one small detail that would elevate the entire experience. He spent that foolish 5% on the spoons. His boss was not happy. Until she saw the first profit and loss statement from the cart. That last 5%, he argues, has an outsized impact on the guest experience. It's the smartest money you'll ever spend. It's the unexpected detail, the generous flourish, The thing that makes people say, wow. Later, at 11 Madison Park, this rule would become central. It was the reason they could splurge on a rare, expensive glass of wine at the end of a pairing. It was the reason they could throw legendary, over-the-top staff parties. And it was the reason they could, on a snowy night, send a family who had never seen snow before up to Central Park with brand new sleds and a chauffeur. They had earned the right to be foolishly generous because they were so disciplined the rest of the time. It was this unique blend of corporate discipline and creative hospitality that caught the eye of a young, ambitious Swiss chef named Daniel Hum. Danny Meyer had just hired Daniel to elevate the food at 11 Madison Park, which at the time was a successful but unremarkable brasserie. The food was getting better every day, but the restaurant as a whole wasn't working. The partnership between the kitchen and the dining room was broken. Daniel told Danny Meyer he needed a new general manager. And he had someone in mind. What about Will? Will was hesitant. He had bad experiences in kitchens where the chef was treated like a god and the dining room staff were treated like servants. He told his dad, "I don't want to work for a chef. It has to be a partnership." So, he and Daniel met for dinner. They discovered a shared passion and a fierce ambition. But Will laid out his one non-negotiable condition. "I don't want to spend my whole life convincing you that what I do is as important as what you do," he told Daniel. "If it's not a true partnership, if what happens in the dining room doesn't matter as much as what happens in the kitchen, then I don't even want to start down this road." Daniel, who had worked in European kitchens where the service staff wasn't even allowed to speak to the cooks, agreed completely. That night, they made a decision that would define their entire future. They would be a restaurant run by both sides of the wall. Every major decision would be made together. It wouldn't be about what was best for the food, or what was best for the service. It would be about what was best for the restaurant as a whole. Their mission was born, to be the 4-star restaurant for the next generation. They wanted to marry the excellence and luxury of classic fine dining with the energy and fun of a more casual experience. They wanted to make fine dining cool. But when Will walked into 11 Madison Park for his first day as general manager, it was anything but cool. The restaurant was a mess. There were 2 warring factions, the old guard servers who were used to the relaxed brasserie style, and the fine dining squad who had come in with Daniel and were frustrated that the existing staff wasn't living up to their exacting standards. Everyone was miserable. There were no clear systems. One manager would tell a server to carry a tray one way, and 10 steps later, another manager would tell him to carry it the other way. Will knew his first job wasn't to issue commands. It was to listen. He sat down with every single member of the team, from the managers to the dishwashers, and just heard them out. He learned that leaders don't need to cannonball into a new organization, they need to ease into the pool. He also started looking for hidden treasures. His dad had told him a story from his time in Vietnam, about a soldier nicknamed Kentucky who was a terrible shot and out of shape. Everyone had written him off. But his dad took the time to get to know him and discovered that, having grown up in the deep backwoods, Kentucky had a supernatural sense of direction. He couldn't shoot, but he could navigate the dense jungle better than anyone. His dad moved him to the front of the platoon, and he became one of their strongest assets. Will found his own Kentucky in a food runner named Eleazar Cervantes. His managers complained that Eleazar didn't care about the food. And they were right. He wasn't passionate about it. But Will discovered something else about him. He was incredibly organized and a natural leader. So, Will moved him from running food to being the expediter, the person in the kitchen who is like an air traffic controller, directing the flow of every dish to every table. It's one of the most stressful and important jobs in any restaurant. And Eleazar was a genius at it. Will had found his hidden strength. The most powerful tool Will used to transform the culture was something deceptively simple: a daily, 30-minute, mandatory pre-meal meeting. This meeting, he believes, is where a collection of individuals becomes a team. It wasn't just about reviewing new menu items. It was about setting the tone, sharing inspiration, and reinforcing the why behind what they were doing. The way you do one thing, he believed, is the way you do everything. So, even the printed notes for the meeting had to be beautiful and thoughtful. He also started to challenge the dusty, unspoken rules of fine dining. He was corrected by a manager for leaning on a table while chatting with a guest. "We never do that," the manager said. "Why?" Will asked. The manager didn't have an answer, other than because that's how it's always been done. For Will, any rule that stood in the way of a genuine human connection was a rule worth breaking. Soon, they were intentionally breaking all sorts of rules. They stopped giving guests a fancy, complicated French pastry called a cannelé as a parting gift, something that was more about showing off their technical skill than giving the guests something they actually wanted. Instead, they sent people home with a simple jar of delicious granola for the next morning. It was a humble, thoughtful touch that felt more like a gift from a friend than a flex from a 4-star restaurant. As the culture began to shift, Will knew he needed to give his team an outlet for their own creativity. This led to one of his most powerful ideas, the ownership programs. He noticed that at most fine dining restaurants, the beverage programs outside of wine, like coffee, beer, or cocktails, were an afterthought. The wine director was an expert in wine, not espresso. But his team was full of young, passionate people who were geeking out about these things in their spare time. So, he took a risk. He found Jim Betts, an unrepentant coffee geek, and said, "The coffee program is yours now. Go make it awesome." He found Kirk Kellaway, who was obsessed with beer, and did the same. He found Leo Robacek, a bartender who was putting himself through medical school, and put him in charge of the cocktail program. These weren't managers, some of them were food runners, the lowest position in the dining room. But he gave them a budget, taught them how to manage it, and then got out of their way. The results were explosive. The programs didn't just get a little better, they became world-class. Kirk's passion was so contagious that soon 11 Madison Park had one of the best beer programs in America. Leo Robacek went on to become one of the most famous mixologists in the world. By tapping into his team's passions, Will had unlocked a new level of excellence. The team was empowered, the guests got a better experience, and the business thrived. It was a win-slash-win-slash-win. This idea of empowerment became the foundation for the next, even more radical, phase of unreasonable hospitality. It started with a hot dog. One afternoon, Will was clearing a table of 4 European tourists who were heading straight to the airport. He overheard one of them say, "We've eaten everywhere, Daniel, per se, Momofuku. The only thing we didn't get to try was a street hot dog." A light bulb went off over Will's head. He ran out of the restaurant to the soubrettes cart on the corner, bought a hot dog for $2, and brought it back to the kitchen. He then had to convince his world-class chef, Daniel Hum, to plate it. After some resistance, Daniel cut the hot dog into 4 perfect pieces and artfully arranged it on 4 plates with swooshes of ketchup and mustard. Will brought the plates out to the table and said, "We overheard you, and we didn't want you to go home with any culinary regrets." The table freaked out. They told him it was the highlight of their entire trip to New York. They would be telling that story for the rest of their lives. This moment unlocked a powerful realization. The most memorable gifts aren't about how much they cost, they're about how much thought went into them. A $2 hot dog had a bigger impact than a $1,000 bottle of wine could have, because it was personal. It was a one-of-a-kind, improvisational moment of connection. It was, in a word, a legend. Legend became the internal shorthand for these bespoke, over-the-top acts of hospitality. The goal was to create at least one legend every single service. This was so important that Will created a new position in the restaurant, the Dreamweaver. The Dreamweaver's entire job was to listen for opportunities and then make magic happen. When a couple mentioned their vacation flight had been canceled, the Dreamweavers turned a private dining room into a beach, complete with sand, beach chairs, and a kiddie pool filled with water for them to dip their toes in. When a family from Spain dining on a snowy evening mentioned their kids had never seen snow before, a dreamweaver was dispatched to buy 4 brand new sleds, and after dinner, a chauffeured SUV whisked the family to Central Park for a few hours of spontaneous play. These legends became the engine of the restaurant's culture. They gave the staff a creative outlet and a sense of purpose. And they gave the guests a story to tell. A great legend, Will says, puts you right back in the moment, so you're not just recounting the experience, you're reliving it. But you can't rely on spontaneous inspiration alone. So they also created a toolkit of pre-planned gifts for common situations. If a guest was flying out after their meal, they were sent home with a snack box for the plane. If a table joked about having a hangover the next day, they were given a rescue kit with strong coffee, Alka-Seltzer, and a muffin. They systemized these gestures so that everyone on the team had the power to be generous, all the time. This commitment to unreasonable hospitality was working. The restaurant was climbing the ranks of the 50 best list. But the journey was not without its painful setbacks. After a major reinvention of the menu focused on New York City history and traditions, the New York Times critic Pete Wells wrote a scathing takedown. The problem wasn't the food, it was the speeches. Will had become so obsessed with telling the story behind every dish that he had scripted his team. He had taken away their ability to be themselves, to have a real conversation. He had prioritized control over trust. It was a deeply humiliating public failure. But Will stood in front of his team, apologized, and took full responsibility. He realized that his greatest strength, his fanatical attention to detail, could also be his greatest weakness if it led him to micromanage his team. He had to learn to trust them. They stripped back the scripts and went back to basics, empowering the staff to connect with guests in their own authentic way. This led to the final, and most profound, evolution of the restaurant. As they ate their own 15-course tasting menu one night, Will and Daniel had a startling realization: they were bored. They counted the number of times a server interrupted their conversation to set silverware, pour wine, or clear a plate. Over the course of the meal, it was 90 times. 90. Their stated goal was to be a place of human connection, yet they were interrupting their guests constantly. It was time to get back to basics. They simplified their mission statement to just 2 words: delicious and gracious. They cut the menu from 15 courses down to 7, focusing on making every single bite unforgettable. And they did something truly radical: they got rid of the menu entirely. The meal now began with a simple conversation. The captain would sit down with the guests and just talk to them about what they felt like eating, what they loved, and what they didn't. The experience was no longer a monologue delivered by the restaurant, it was a true dialogue. This final evolution was the culmination of everything they had learned. It was the perfect synthesis of excellence and hospitality, of control and trust, of being restaurant smart and corporate smart. In 2017, 7 years after they were ranked dead last, Will and Daniel found themselves back in that awards hall, this time in Melbourne, Australia. They counted down from 50, then 40, then 10, then 5, then 3. Then the MC announced the #1 restaurant in the world, 11 Madison Park. As Will stood on that stage, he was the first dining room person ever to accept the award on behalf of their restaurant. It was a testament to their journey. They had reached the top not just by changing what was on the plate, but by fundamentally changing how they thought about their relationship with the people they served. They had proven that excellence could take you far, but it was their relentless, joyful, and deeply human pursuit of unreasonable hospitality that had taken them all the way to the top. The story doesn't end there, of course. Life, like business, is about endless reinvention. Will and Daniel eventually went their separate ways. When faced with the impossibly difficult decision of how to divide the company they had built together, Will remembered his father's advice: ask yourself what right looks like, then do that. For Will, what looked right was allowing the company to stay together, which meant one of them had to walk away from it all. So he did. But the philosophy he built remains. It's a reminder that no matter what business you're in, Whether you're selling coffee, selling cars, or selling software, you have a choice. You can simply provide a service. Or you can join the hospitality economy. You can choose to be unreasonable. You can choose to give people more than they expect, and in doing so, you can make a little magic in a world that desperately needs more of it. Commentary. What I love so much about Unreasonable Hospitality is that, at its core, it's a deeply optimistic book. It's built on the simple, powerful belief that making other people feel good is one of the most rewarding things we can do, not just for them, but for ourselves. Will Guidara calls it a selfish pleasure, and he's right. There is a unique joy that comes from seeing someone's face light up with surprise and delight because of something thoughtful you did for them. The book is full of grand, theatrical gestures, the sleds, the beach, the street hot dog. It's easy to look at those and think, well, of course, they could do that. They were the #1 restaurant in the world. I don't have that kind of budget or a team of dreamweavers, but to focus on the scale of the gifts is to miss the point entirely. The real lesson isn't about spending more money, it's about investing more thought. The $2 hot dog had more impact than a $1,000 bottle of wine because it wasn't about luxury, it was about listening. It was about seeing another human being and responding to a simple, unstated desire. Hospitality, in its purest form, is the act of making someone feel seen. This is a principle you can apply anywhere, at any age, in any situation. You don't need a budget to practice unreasonable hospitality. You just need to pay attention. You can practice it in your part-time job by remembering a regular customer's name and asking them about their day. You can practice it on a group project at school by bringing snacks for your team during a late-night study session. You can practice it at home by making your mom a cup of coffee just the way she likes it, without her having to ask. These small, intentional acts of generosity are the building blocks of strong relationships and strong cultures. They communicate, I see you. I value you. You matter. So, how can you start putting this into practice right now? Here are a few simple ideas drawn from the book. First, define your color. Remember, service is the black and white, it's the baseline expectation. Hospitality is the color. In whatever you do, ask yourself, what is my color? What is the small, extra touch of warmth, personality, or thoughtfulness that I can add? It could be a handwritten thank you note instead of an email. It could be a genuine, unhurried compliment. Find your unique way to add color to your interactions. Second, go on a hunt for one legend this week. Look for a single opportunity to do something small and unexpectedly kind for someone. Overhear a classmate stressing about a test? Leave an encouraging note on their desk. Notice your dad is exhausted after a long week? Take one of his chores off his plate without being asked. Don't ask for permission, and don't look for credit. Just do it for the joy of giving the gift. And third, the next time you face a problem, whether it's a difficult customer, a frustrated teammate, or a personal challenge, ask yourself this powerful question: what is the hospitality solution? Instead of defaulting to the most efficient or logical answer, force yourself to think about what the most generous, human-centered solution would be. Often, the answer to a problem isn't more control or more efficiency, it's more connection. That was a deep dive into Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. We've certainly covered the main ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a photograph of a great meal. You can see what it looks like, but you can't taste the flavors or feel the warmth of the room. The true magic of this book is in the stories, in the quiet moments where Guidara's journey connects with your own. This summary is just an invitation. If anything we've talked about today has sparked something in you, I encourage you to accept it. Grab a copy of the book, because reading it isn't just learning a new business strategy, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see every interaction in your daily life. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Your support means the world and helps us keep growing this community together. Let's keep learning.